Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for coming. Let's start as usual with a meditation. So, sitting in a proper posture, upright. Relaxed in a way that you can sit still so that your mind can settle. But you don't want to fall asleep. And allowing your shoulders to drop, your abdomen to be soft. Relaxing and turning inward. And today I'll let you set your own personal motivation, which includes doing this activity for the benefit of yourself and others. But however you want to elaborate that. And then when you're ready, take some deep breaths to release any extra tension that you're still holding. Just let it go as you exhale. So fully aware of the sensations in your body. And now I'd like you to shift to becoming aware of your own consciousness, of the watcher or the observer that is always present, the awareness that is always present whenever any bodily sensation is noticed. So the sensations shift to the back, and the subjective, the awareness, becomes more the focus. And that awareness is clear, and it's receptive, and it's open. So if you can imagine that the mind experiences like an aquarium with fish in it, and the thoughts, the content are the fish, but now you're switching to look at the water in which the fish swim. So the space of the mind. Simply being present. And whatever arises in the background just passes through. And you stay still like a mountain, watching. And from this place of awareness, you can choose to observe the sensations in your body, but don't lose that sense of being aware that consciousness is present whenever sensation is noticed. And as usual, if you get drawn away from that awareness of your own presence, very kindly, gently bring it back. Shift again into the background, the space of the mind, the awareness. It's like you're sitting still in a movie theater and all experience is the movie. But you have an awareness that you are sitting there and you are not the movie. That the mind watches, receives passively from a place of stillness. And noticing how comfortable it feels to sit still, to simply watch. How this is a calm, peaceful place. And even if emotions or difficult thoughts arise, there is still a space in the mind that is still, that is calm, that is peaceful. Okay, now coming out of the meditation slowly. So let's do some review from yesterday. So I had the very kind support once again of my technical person, Felipe, who redid my drawing on perception in a much nicer way. But I think it gives the same message. So just to review, when we perceive something, okay, we receive photons from light waves or particles from the bouncing of the light off the object, a flower in this case. And it goes into our eyeballs, right? Goes in there, and it creates certain electrochemical reactions in our brains, okay? And from that process, then in our minds, we create an image of a flower, okay? So that image of the flower, we believe usually that it is the exact same as the flower that is out here. When in fact, the mind does all these little arrows that you see around the image of the flower. These are ways in which the mind is influencing that sense perception and creating an image that is not necessarily exactly the same as the external image. In the sense that one thing that it does is that, in fact, we know from reasoning, from observation over time, that that flower is actually deteriorating. It's, it's rotting or, dying, right? But we can't see that process, that moment to moment change. We can with our senses, because of course the photons are reflecting it, but our minds can't process it in that way. They have to actually make that image permanent in order for us to interact with it, okay? But as a result, then this arrow down here, right here, this makes us project onto the flower permanence, which we have actually put on in our minds, okay? We've put in our minds permanence on the flower, and then we believe that that's how the flower actually exists, as unchanging, okay? Some other things we're going to talk about today: independence, beautiful, this idea that I receive sense impressions of, let's say, a flower, and then I get a good feeling from it. And so I think that the good feeling is in the flower, okay, because the flower is beautiful. But really, if that flower were beautiful, then every being that had a mind would see the flower as beautiful, okay? And not everybody does. Some people don't like flowers, right? Some people, and like sometimes insects that aren't interested in flowers, they don't see it as beautiful. They see it as a source of food or a source of danger or something like that, okay? So from its own side, the flower is not necessarily beautiful. Okay. So let's see. Then we talked about anger. Anger is so with anger, what we do is that we then project onto external situations we get a perception of them and we exaggerate the negative aspects. So karmic seed to get angry ripens in our minds, and the conditions come together. You know, someone yells at us, someone harms us, we see, you know, so we have a difficult situation, and then we exaggerate the negative aspects, okay? And we feel like we cannot tolerate the situation or the object or the person, so then we wish to harm it or get away from it, okay? Because we have put, instead of recognizing that that anger has arisen in our own mind, we have put it onto the object, okay? So then we start looking at what are some antidotes. So anger is a very disturbing state of mind. It leads us to do harmful things. And so usually when we get angry, we want to solve the situation as possible, but we don't necessarily have control over the external situation that we see as causing the anger. So what we can do is we can develop patience. So patience is the calm, peaceful state of mind that can bear hardship or harm without getting upset. So we learn to respond to this anger in a different way. We start to shift our perception of the situation in a way that we can be patient with it, that we can learn to tolerate it. And then when we respond with a more calm, peaceful mind, we're less likely to react to make the situation worse. We're better off at dealing with it effectively. And then loving kindness wants others to be happy, and we cannot want harm to others at the same time as we love them. So some other antidotes that we talked about yesterday. We can think about the disadvantages of anger. We can maintain, in general, a relaxed, happy mind. We can be aware of our triggers. What are the situations that make us angry in general, and how can we be ready for them and have a calm mind when we approach those situations? We can remember the positive aspects of difficult people and situations. So positive aspects, one positive aspect is that we're burning off negative karma. Another positive aspect is that we're being challenged to learn, to develop our loving kindness and compassion, even in difficult situations. And then we can also recognize how our mind creates the experience of anger, how we tell this whole story about a situation, and that's the exaggeration of the negativity that happens. Okay, and we recognize that we cannot find one place within the situation, one single part of the situation that causes our anger. It's actually our whole story and our labeling of the situation that allows the anger to arise in us. Okay. So then instead of having to stop the sharing, instead of having to fix every situation, now we can decrease our anger by working with our perceptions of the situation. Okay, and this is usually, we do these antidotes after anger has already arisen. Okay, so after we've already got upset in a situation and now we have to deal with it. Okay, and oftentimes we can't necessarily change other people. We can't necessarily tell them to behave differently so that we feel better. So we have to work on our own minds so that we respond to those situations with a more comfortable point of view, whether it's compassion, understanding, whatever makes our minds peaceful, so that then when we approach that situation, that relationship, it's a way that is more positive, can influence it in a positive way, that can create more harmony, okay, instead of creating more conflict. And this doesn't mean, compassion doesn't mean that we let people walk all over us. We had this discussion a bit. If I get angry in a certain situation, it's giving me good information that this situation is not okay, right? That it's not perfect. right? That there's something, some condition that is unfair, that harm is being done, okay? But then I can shift it and I can say, okay, how can I deal with this situation better? Do I deal with it by being angry, or do I deal with it by being compassionate and understanding? Okay. And if I'm gonna deal with it effectively, sometimes I have to, for the kindness of toward the other person, I have to be honest and tell them to stop what they're doing. You know, that what they're doing is harming our relationship. But I do it out of compassion for the other person. If they want to continue to be my friend and for us to feel good, you know, have a good relationship and, you know, be positive, then I have to let them know. And sometimes that brings, you know, they don't like it, they get upset for a while, but you're doing it, if as much as possible, with a positive, compassionate motivation, that what they're doing is creating suffering for themselves. And you don't want that anymore for themselves. And so sometimes it takes, compassion takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of strength in order to be compassionate and set boundaries with people. Okay. So even if I have a different point of view that I'm compassionate, it doesn't mean that sometimes I'm not strong, especially like with children. Sometimes with children, you have to be, you know, raise your voice, or, you know, use strong words like set boundaries. And parents do that, you know, like this idea of tough love, I think someone called it. Okay. So let's go on. So let's go a little deeper into the causes of suffering. So from a Buddhist point of view, there is actually a process that results in our suffering. Okay, so the first step in the process is that we have an ignorance. So remember, yesterday we were talking about the fact that our belief that things exist externally, separately from our minds, that there is somehow a concrete, out there, external, factual reality that is completely separate from my internal perception of it. That reality is out there, and what is in my mind and the things that I imagine in my mind are completely separate, that they are fantasy, they aren't real. Okay, so what we're starting to do here is we're starting to see that in fact there is not a separate external reality that exists, that without the presence of my consciousness, without my mind participating in it. Okay, and this is a really tough concept. Okay, so if you don't get it right away, that's fine. It takes time to study it, to learn it. But it's actually, the more that we study science, the more that we look, especially now on a subatomic level, when you study this area of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, what they're starting to find is actually at the you know, the most basic atomic level, certain particles, in particular electrons, which are the negatively charged particles, that they exist in a probability field in general. And it's only when we start looking at them specifically, when we try to find one specifically, that they actually exist in a certain place. So it's when consciousness, when the observer comes into play, that things actually exist in a certain place as they are. So in quantum mechanics, we're starting to see that perception has to be involved in the existence of subatomic particles in order for them to be in a certain place. Okay, so that's just like really brief, and I'm not a physicist, but just to show you that science is starting to really support our view that this separation between our minds and somehow this concrete external reality is not as absolute as we believe. Okay, and this is one of the definitions of non-dual. You know, there isn't this dualism between subject and object. Okay, so what happens with suffering is that this belief that there is an out there concrete independent reality, when we contact it, okay, we have a perception of something, and then a feeling arises in us. Okay, so a feeling of positive, negative, or neutral happens whenever we contact anything. Okay, so as soon as I see a person for the first time, I immediately have some kind of a reaction to them, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. Okay, and I put together that feeling of positive, negative, neutral with this ignorance, okay, that it exists out there, and I get a misperception that that feeling is in that thing, okay? So I see that thing as inherently negative or inherently positive or inherently neutral, instead of recognizing that it's because it has arisen in my own mind, the feeling. And then I've overlaid it with this perception of the separation of my mind from the thing. Okay. And that misperception then leads to an afflictive emotion. So, for example, with anger, when I put the anger on the person who is harming me, and I say the feeling is coming from them and they are separate from me, then anger arises and I want to get them as far away from me as possible. That's how I'm going to solve the problem. Okay, so then as a result, I do harmful actions. I'm mean to them. I make them feel bad. I reject them in some way. And then as a result, I bring suffering on myself, like we talked about in terms of karma. By harming others, rejecting others, being mean to others, I create the seeds for those experiences to happen to me. We can also think of this in terms of attachment, okay? So obsessive desire, we could call it, okay? We have the ignorance that something exists independently of my mind, that it is out there. And then when I contact it, let's say I eat ice cream, okay? And I have this good feeling. The first time I taste ice cream, I think it's great, right? And this positive feeling arises in me. So then I get the misperception that the positive feeling is all coming from the ice cream, okay? That the ice cream is the source of my pleasure, okay? But we know that in fact, that ice cream is not the source of the pleasure, because if it were the source of the pleasure, it would always be the source of happiness for me and pleasure, okay? And it isn't. At some point, I don't like ice cream anymore, right? I don't like ice cream when I'm not hungry, right? I don't like ice cream after I've eaten a half gallon, I mean, American gallon. Anyway, a whole whatever. I don't know how ice cream comes. Pint doesn't work either, huh? Kg. Can you eat a whole kg of ice cream? I don't know. Anyway, once once you've eaten so much ice cream, it's no longer the source of pleasure for you, right? But as long as as long as we believe that inherently ice cream tastes good, then we want it, right? We try to get it. Maybe we steal when we're younger. We steal money so we can go out and buy ice cream, right? And as a result, we do this harmful action of stealing, and we bring suffering results onto ourselves. Okay, so this is how this starts with this ignorance and this feeling, this belief that things exist out there. So if we want to stop this cycle of, these negative emotions arising that result in us doing these negative actions that then result in our suffering, if we want to stop that, the best way is going to be to stop it at the root where the ignorance happens, okay? Remembering that things don't exist, they exist in a different way than they appear. They appear to us as existing out there, okay? And it's what's most difficult about this concept. If you're having resistance to it, that's great, because that's, if you don't believe me, that's really good. It's like, no, of course not. Things, there's a reality, my mind is in here, right? Most people, because we have never seen things in any other way, We have never had the experience of anything existing, seeing things in the way that they actually exist as empty. Okay, so we'll go into this. So if I see things in the way that they actually exist as this combination, this process, this constantly changing nature, this way in which my mind participates in the reality, then that counteracts, that's the wisdom that counteracts that ignorance that believes that it exists separately, independently. Okay, so the way that we do that is we meditate, we contemplate emptiness, okay, this or dependent arising. So what is that? All right, so dependent arising or emptiness, they're actually two different things, but they complement each other. So one aspect of dependent arising is that, oops, I didn't fix that. Nothing exists independently, okay? There are things that exist permanently. That's a mistake. Sorry about that. But nothing exists independently, okay? In the sense that we've talked about this in terms of the self, okay? We've talked about the fact that in order for us to exist, we have to have other people, right? Who have grown our food, who have made our clothing, that our minds are not even independent of other, the inputs, the experiences that we have had, the interactions that we have had. So nothing that is the product of causes and conditions exists independently. That's pretty basic. And because things exist independently, they have no absolute reality or inherent existence on their own. And mind is one of the causes of existent things, okay? In order for things to exist, there has to be consciousness present, okay? So let's break this down a little bit. So if things could exist separately out there from my mind, then they would have to have, let's take this cup, for example, okay? If this cup existed separately from my mind, then there would have to be something within the cup, okay, that told me I'm a cup, right? There would have to be something here that said to my mind, I am a cup, okay? There would have to be cupness in here, okay? If it could exist separately, objectively from my mind, right, then there would have to be in here cupness that says I'm a cup to my mind, right? If my mind didn't participate, there'd have to be some reality that's cupness. So then if I look closely, I start breaking it down, right? Where is the cupness in this thing? Okay, so is it in the handle? Well, no, that's not a cup, right? Is it in the circle? Is it in the cylinder part? Is that a cup? Well, that's a cylinder. Is it in the bottom part, right? In the little circle that, is it in the space? Okay, is that what a cup is? That tells my mind it's a cup? But can you have the space without the other parts, right? Is it in the function of me drinking, right? Of the fact that I can drink out of this, right? Where is that function in that cup? Where is the function? The function is actually in my mind. I am recognizing that this is something that I can drink out of. Okay? So when I put all that together, my mind labels all these things coming together a cup, and then a cup exists. So a cup had, and now if it were another thing, if it were a cup from its own side, then it would, then everyone would see it as a cup. And sometimes it becomes a pencil holder, doesn't it? And for an ant, it's like a swimming pool, right? It's not a cup. They can't drink out of this, right? It's no longer a cup. okay? Or sometimes it becomes a vase, right? So what is it? And how doesn't our mind, doesn't our, doesn't our perception have to participate even for this to exist as a cup? Our mind has to participate in it, which doesn't nullify the fact that there are certain causes and conditions that went into this thing, right? I'm not saying it's all in my mind, okay? There had to have been other minds that put it together. There had to have been, the clay and the paint and, all the processes that went to putting it together, okay? So let's think about another example of the dependency, the dependent existence of things, the fact that things don't exist in the way that they appear. Let me see if this second slide helps, and then I'll do my example. Okay, so things appear to exist as independently, right? But in fact, emptiness is the fact that things are empty of existing in the way that they appear. So to my mind, that cup appears independent from my mind, okay? That's because of my ignorance that perceives it in that way. But when we recognize that they are empty of appearing in that way, then things start to become less solid. They become like an illusion or like a dream, okay? Not as absolute, because an illusion and a dream exists in our minds, doesn't it? Right? When we have a dream, we can have a whole experience in a dream of, of being harmed or, living a life, or, we can have a whole, and then we wake up and we realize that it's not real. It was all in our minds. But when we start to see that our minds have to be present in order for anything to exist, we start to see that that external reality is not as solid as we believe, and it is more like a dream, more like a hallucination, okay? And because our mind participates in our reality, when we change our mind, we start to change our reality, okay? All right, so let me do this other example of showing you that things exist dependently, that there is no absolute inherent existence in anything, okay? So let's take the example of a song, okay? So we have, first of all, we have the idea of a song in someone's mind. And of course, even the idea of a song has its own causes and conditions of someone else who has had experiences of other music and, other musicians and training in music and that sort of thing. So they had come up with an idea of a song, and then they get their band together and they teach them and they play the song, okay? So then where does the song exist? Where is the inherently existent single song that exists? Is it in the mind of the person? Is it in the band? So then let's say the band plays the song, okay? So then it gets recorded and it gets etched on a CD or, on a memory stick, okay? And then, so then is the song on the CD? In the CD? Is the song the CD? Or is the song the hard drive, right? Or the stick, the memory stick, right? It's a memory stick is not a song, and neither is a CD. A CD is plastic. That's not what a song is. So then we play it, right? We play it on our computers, or we play it on our CD, right? Or old times, we play it on our record players. And then it creates sound waves, right? That come to our ears. So is the song in the sound waves? Is the song in the movement of the bones in our ear? Is the song in our minds when we hear it? Now, it couldn't just be in my mind, because it wouldn't exist in my mind without the musicians having played it, without the CD having existed that I could play it. So the song is a dependent arising. Okay, it's a coming together of causes and conditions, including my mind that has a sound image. We would call it a sound, yeah, this sound generality. That's kind of a messed up word, but that's what they use, a sound generality of the song in my mind. We could say a sound image, an experience of the song, right? And then I label it a song, okay? Just like the musicians who made it labeled it a song. So there's no absolute, you know, external existent thing that is separate from my mind. It cannot exist under its own power. It cannot exist from its own side. You may, if you've studied emptiness at all, these are some of the synonyms for this emptiness. And the more that we meditate on how everything exists in this way as empty of, oh, I'm getting late, aren't I? No, I'm okay. Okay, all right. As empty of existing in this way, the more that it starts, we start to see that when that process happens of I start feeling like I need ice cream or I need to get that person away, we start to see, why don't I just affect my perception of it, right? Why don't I just work with my perception instead of having to constantly change external reality, because external reality doesn't exist so separate from my mind. My mind participates in that creation. And when I see it, when I, you know, create this huge division and I put, you know, independence on it, then it's much harder to deal with. It's much harder to function because I'm always helpless. I'm always out of control. Things just happen to me. I'm completely the victim. Okay. Now we can't just label anything. I can't just say, oh, this is a pencil, right? That doesn't work. Okay. There has to be a valid basis. There has to be something that can function as a cup in order for me to label a cup. So it's not just in my mind, but it does have, my mind has a huge participation in it as this dependent arising, okay? And that's how this idea of changing our perceptions of things starts to change how things actually exist. Okay, all right, so lots of meditation on this, lots of working with it. Then we start to shift, and lots of, you know, hearing this over and over again from other teachers who can explain it better than I can. You know, slowly we just start to relax more. We start to see things as a process and see things as not as absolute as we believe them to be. Okay, if you have some questions about that, we can do that now.
Give me 1 second. People are writing up their questions. There's one about anger. Should we do that?
Sure.
Okay. I'll unmute Linz. You can now ask your question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to see you again. I'm going to read my question because so I don't miss out a part. What do we do if we just don't want to be angry? You analyze the situation. In my case, it's my parents. So you have the way we were raised, but you want to put that in place. You accept that they did the best they could.
Mm-hmm.
All adults, but they keep on acting in a way of denigrate me, say things that hurt, just don't accept me as I am. So then it's easier for me to just keep on developing myself and find the way I am without seeing them. if I see them, they just keep on cross my boundaries. I can't respect my boundaries. So do I have to go into them all the time? And then that creates a negative energy, but I'm not in peace in ignoring them. So it feels like me getting drawn down by their negative energy. Or the other possibility is that I'm feeling bad because I don't see my parents and I hurt them. So if I tell them what it does to me from my perspective without blaming them, they either don't listen, or they say I'm exaggerating, or I don't have to be so silly. So now in effect that they want me to come home, but they want a perfect daughter to come home, not me. So, or I keep going to them, but then it's difficult to be who I am. Or I live separate from them, but then I can't find peace because I'm feeling that I'm ignoring them. So do I just try to accept that I live separate from them, and can I be at ease with that? Or is there still another way to deal with this situation and find balance?
Yes. Well, I think we can grow into being able to be with them even before they've changed and accepted us. I think that sometimes until we get a strong sense of ourselves and a comfort, with ourselves, with who we are, that is not what they, the things that they said that harmed us, the more that we can get comfortable and strong in that, then the more that we can be with them in a way that is compassionate, accepting, without expecting them to change. So I think it's a process in the sense of separating yourself with them from them for a while until you have the strength that you can go into the situation and not lose yourself when you're with them. Okay, so it's possible to eventually, and hopefully before you lose them, right, it's possible to get stronger and stronger in yourself, and then have, like you're already starting to do, accepting that they're adults, that they did the best that they could, and that they too their motivation, their intention was that they wanted to be happy, and they didn't want suffering, just like everybody else. They didn't intend to hurt you when they have these expectations of you. So the other thing you do, if taking this time away from them, is that you start to you can meditate on compassion for them, and recognizing that they, like you said, they did the best that they can, and so the more you get stronger, the more that you can just recognize that they're like everybody else. They have difficulties, they have ignorance, and that doesn't have to affect you from your strong, confident place. It doesn't have to affect you. You can be in their presence, and it doesn't have to bother you even. You can just recognize, oh, that's the way they are, and I love them anyway, and everybody has their faults and everybody has their strengths, and I can still be present with them. But it takes time. And I think it does take some separation, especially if you lose yourself when you're with them. My parents are not Buddhist. They're Catholic, and it's funny because for years my mom didn't say grace, prayers before you eat. And whenever I go home now, we're saying grace, and I'm like, what's going on here? It's like this, so I accept it. I say, okay, she's, from whatever her point of view is, she thinks it's a good thing, and it doesn't, I just say my own prayers in my own mind from a Buddhist point of view, and then we go our separate ways. I can't spend like, I couldn't live with them, right? I would lose my practice most likely if I lived with them. But I can visit with them for, like, I think I can do about a month now. I can live with them for a month. but it's a challenge. I have to be patient. I have to be kind. I have to work. There are times when I get angry and I have to like go to bed early, and be by myself, if I can. And yeah, so it's doable. It's just, and it's a great Dharma practice, to learn how to do that.
Okay, thank you. It will need some time. We are separate for 1 year now. So now with all the things that are going on, they want contacts, and I also. But I'm
Yeah.
feeling that I'm on the process because I need some time more to just develop myself, and then. So, but then I know that it's okay. It just takes time because I keep on blaming myself. I should just be okay with the situation.
Oh, I don't think it's that easy. No, I don't think it's that easy. I think it takes time and practice and working on your mind. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we'll move on to Gabriella's question. Gabriella Fleck, you can now ask your question.
Hi, Drolma. Thanks
Hi.
for everything and for being a great teacher.
Thank you.
So my question is, how to understand if our perception is indeed the truth and the reality, and that we are not misreading or misunderstanding a given situation or a person's behavior.
Okay. So the difficulty, my first instinct, the difficulty with that is that there is the assumption that there is some reality or truth that is unchanging in any situation. And because there are always different points of view from any situation, and because situations are always changing, there is never a real truth that we can get to. Okay. Now, so, and a concrete, absolute, static truth. Now, so then how do we get to know things, right? It's like, oh, then I can't know anything, right? So what we do is we start to see that things are so much bigger, things are so much wider. So we see, like, from this point of view, this is how the situation is. And from this point of view, this is how the situation is. And from this point of view, this is how the situation is. And this is how it was, when people were when people were acting this way at this time, and when I was this kind of person and they were that kind of person. And this is how the situation is now that I'm an adult and I'm, like this and this, because even historically, we know that that history is rewritten, that our memories, we rewrite our memories, right? So there's never any absolute way in which there is understanding of a situation, but there's lots of different, and being more comfortable with all the different perspectives and aspects and positive characteristics and negative characteristics of a situation, and the fact that it's changing. And we do that through analysis, through wisdom.
Okay. Yes, I agree that this is true in relation to how can I read a situation in a positive or in a negative way. But in relation to a person's behavior, for example, this person has like his own beliefs and his own reality and his own intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that also in relation to a person's behavior, it's like not, is it not possible to read that because it's constantly changing as well?
Yeah, I mean, as much as we can through talking to that person, we can see what their intentions are. We can learn what their intentions are. And we can see how they interpret their own behavior. And then we also interpret their behavior in a certain way. And so the reality of the situation becomes both their point of view of their behavior and your point of view of their behavior. And it's only through communication that we can start to share that.
Yeah.
So we can, yeah, see. And it's both. Both are true. It's not just one absolute. You know, there is no you know, it's both are true.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm going to unmute Vidis.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my question is, how do we explain attachment? You explained attachment or perception in case of things. How do we do it in case of people? Like you explained how our perception is regarding a cup, how a cup is a cup for us, but not for an ant, maybe.
Right.
How do we do that with people, with
Yeah.
people with whom we have attachment? It could be our parents or siblings or friends.
Okay.
How do we do that?
So attachment is, we haven't gone into it. We haven't had time to do that. And we're gonna talk about it in the next course. So I hope you come back, but I'll give you a short thing. Okay. I'll give you a short. When we're talking about attachment, we're not talking about connection. Okay. Because we can have connection with others, and that's good. We want quality connections with others. Attachment is the opposite of anger, when we start exaggerating the positive qualities of someone and believing that they are the source of our ultimate happiness, that we cannot possibly be happy unless that person is in our lives. Okay. And then the belief, you know, when the idea of us losing that person comes up in our minds, or we actually lose them, then that creates a huge amount of suffering. Okay. Now, when I lose someone that I'm connected to and I care about, sure, I'm going to be sad, but I'm not going to be overwhelmed with it unless I have this belief that they are the source of the only way I can be happy is to be with them. So we start to, you know, see that people have both positive and negative characteristics, that our relationships with them are both positive and negative, that they are constantly changing, that they are no one is always going to be our friend or our parent or our sibling, and they haven't always been our parent or our friend or our sibling, and we have been happy with or without them. So we start to just be a little lighter in our relationships, but it doesn't mean we don't still enjoy them and we love them, right? It's just this definition of loving someone because it hurts when I'm not with them. I don't agree with that definition. That's, you know, drama, that's TV, that's movies, you know, that's not necessarily real life.
Okay.
All right.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay. This question is in continuation with the last question that this lady asked about. And you said that there has to be both the views, the view of the other person and my view. There's no absolute. So
Right.
how do we define it in case of perhaps say a crime? There is a criminal. He could have his own views and I can have my own views. So this means he would never be punished, or we just let it go?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, punishment. You know, my first reaction is that if someone is harming others, and it's clear that no matter what their intention is, that they are hurting others, then we do have a responsibility, I think, to stop them, okay, to limit their behavior. And that's a compassionate thing to do. But punishment means we have to inflict pain on them because they inflicted pain on others. And I'm not sure I agree with that. I know it's a very fundamental part of our society, and that somehow it's a way in which we teach others not to harm again, that we use pain, we inflict pain in order to teach others not to inflict pain. But I'm not sure about that. I mean, we'd have to, right now, I think it works somewhat, but I think it also doesn't. I think the emphasis on actually teaching would be better, and I'm of course coming from a country where there's a huge amount of our population is imprisoned, you know. So yeah, it's very complex, but that's a few of my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Charles. Charles, you can ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
On your PowerPoint, that one sentence of yours was that nothing exists independently, and there was and permanently. But you said that this part you wanted to take it out.
Yes.
So my question is pretty simple. What is permanence, in your opinion?
Okay, so some permanent meaning unchanging, not meaning eternal, right? Permanent, unchanging, unobstructed space. Unobstructed space. So if you can imagine,
Yeah.
If you can imagine, say that again.
Could you define this notion?
Yes. So unobstructed space is if you can imagine space in which nothing exists. Okay. Now the other one that they often use is the absence of something. Okay. So if you know, we were in the same room, there, I could say that there is in this room the absence of an elephant. Okay. So in the moment that there is an absence, there is no elephant here, that absence is unchanging. Now, if you brought an elephant into the room, the absence would not change, but there would no longer be an absence. Now there would be a presence, and that would change, of course, constantly. So we're talking about things like vacuums, right? Which there's no such thing, they say, apparently, but I haven't learned much about that. But this idea of a vacuum, that is permanent. That's the only thing that is unchanging, that is permanent. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Should we do one more?
Yeah, I'm going to unmute Lena this time. Lena, you can now ask your question.
You have to unmute her again.
Oh, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So my question is, how does the realization of the concept of emptiness affect your daily perception of reality?
Very good. Very good question. So the way in which we realize emptiness, we call it a realization when we get an experience of it. So we start off conceptually with some of the reasonings that I talked about, like the idea of a CD. Okay, that is the example that you could meditate on, that everything exists in the same way that a CD does. And we get more and more familiar with that concept. And eventually, with the power of our mind and some other, you know, concentration, we get a direct experience of that emptiness. Okay, so it's called a direct yogic experience, which means that it happens in our minds. Okay, so we start to, with our minds, perceive things in the way that they actually exist. Now, how that affects our daily life is that if I were to be able to see things as dependent arisings, as you know, the product of all these causes and conditions, like I could look at a piece of paper and see the tree and see the water and see all the people that went into the piece of paper, and also how my mind is labeling the piece of paper. And I would start to see that the me that is observing that piece of paper also exists in that way. And then I would be much more comfortable with simply letting things be. I wouldn't, this negative emotion of having to get things or having to push things away wouldn't arise. I would be much more comfortable with simply flowing with how things are, and knowing that my place in it is absolutely fine, because that's where I am. That's about the best I can do. It's, and of course the experience is beyond words, because words are dualistic. You know, in order for, you know, us to use language, we have to say it's either this or that. And so actually the experience of emptiness is beyond words, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah, thank you
Okay.
very much.
Sure. Okay, let's do some meditation.
All right. Position. And let's try to bring the body into a posture which is grounded and stable. Keeping your back loosely straight is the most important point. So with the sound of the bell, allow the awareness to permeate the space of the body. Allow it to become grounded in the physical sensations that arise. Noticing the contact between your body and whatever surface you're sitting on. Taking a moment to relax. Taking a few very deep breaths, letting go of any tension, any tightness in the body, and letting go of any worries or concerns in the mind. Trying to bring back the experience of the natural state of your body, which is balanced, possessing the qualities of relaxation, stillness, and alertness. Let the body rest while keeping the mind alert and awake. Simply take a moment to experience this state of calmness. And from this state of calmness, from this balance, we now let go of observing the body and the physical sensations and go into the space of the mind. And there we begin to contemplate on the nature of interdependence. So take this body of ours. It is what we believe in most as something real from its own side. It is what we cling to most, what we think about the most, the one thing that we could take care of most and identify with most. To our hallucinating minds, but think, how is it my body? It has come into being and it continues to exist, depending upon countless causes and conditions. We cannot find my body among any of those causes and conditions. And yet, it is nothing other than those causes and conditions. As one teacher says, it can be said that everything in the universe, before this body came into being, is a valid cause and condition for the existence of this body. So we can begin to analyze, where is this independently existent body? So you can think in this way. My body began with the egg and the sperm of my kind mother and father. So where is my body? Without the mother and father's parents, there would be no mother and father. And without the mother and father, there would be no my body. So where is my body apart from this beginningless mother and father? Without my mother's womb, the egg and sperm could not join and develop. Without the food that my mother ate every day, the egg and sperm could not grow into a fetus. So where is my body apart from the food that she ate? My body is nothing other than a mountain of carrots, potatoes, chickens, and bread, which without the earth, the gardener, the sun, the water, the fertilizer, there would be no carrots. Without the carrots, I would have no mother. Without my mother, there could be no my body. It does not exist. My body would not exist without the clothes that my mother wore to keep her warm in the winter. The clothes in turn would not exist without the sheep who provided the wool, the sheep shearers mothers, the owners of the sheep, the people who processed the wool, the people who turned it into cloth, the truck drivers who took the cloth to the cloth factory, the clothing designers, the designers of the sewing machines, the shops that sold the clothes, the people who made the racks that the clothes found from. Where is my body apart from all of this? It cannot be found. My body would not exist without the cotton bushes, the people who planted the cotton, the gardeners who nourished the cotton bushes, the people who picked the cotton, the people who drove the trucks that took the cotton to be processed, the architect of the factory where the cotton was turned into cloth, the people who turned the cotton into cloth, the people who dyed the cloth, the people who made the dye, the person who designed the packet that contained the dye, the printer who printed the packet, the people who made the printing machine. Where is my body apart from all of these causes and conditions? It does not exist independently. My body would not exist without the doctors and nurses who helped it come out of the womb, the soft cloth that protected it and kept it warm, the cot in which it was put to sleep, the milk from my mother's breast, the food that my mother ate that transformed into the milk that nourished my body, the nurses who checked the body while it was sleeping to make sure it did not suffocate, the heating in the hospital that kept the body warm, the electricity that kept the heaters running, the electricians who did the wire in the hospital, the colleges that they went to become electricians, the teachers of the electricians. Where is my body apart from all these countless causes and conditions? It cannot be found anywhere. My body is nothing other than the food that I ate as a child, the milk and rice and peas and lambs and apples and eggs, My body would not exist without the food, the gardeners, the people who tracked the vegetables to the market, those who sold the vegetables, the people who made the shelves at the market that held the vegetables off the ground, the people who made the stalls at the market, those who made the shop where the lamb was sold, the person who killed the lamb, the lamb's mother, the people who skinned the lamb, the person who packed it, the person who put it in the refrigerator at the supermarket, the people who made the refrigerator, the people who made the factory where the refrigerator was made. Well, where is my body apart from all of this? My body would not exist without the mountains of morality practiced, which is its main karmic cause. The morality could have not been practiced without the kindness of the teachers who showed the path to the person in a previous life, without the kindness of the friends, without the books in which the teachings were printed, the people who printed those books, the person who designed the typeface used in the books that the people and made the paper, the people who chopped down the trees from which the paper was made, the previous parents, the food that the previous mother ate to nourish her body so that the body in her womb could grow, so that the previous person could survive and practice morality in order for me to create the cause to have my body in this life. So broadening our perspective in this way, trying to connect with this network of interdependence, seeing that our bodies rely on so many causes and conditions, on so many other people. It is clear that there is no my body apart from all these beginningless causes and conditions. So what is there to cling to? What is there to hold as so independent? What is there to identify with? Where is this body separate from all these causes? And simply let this awareness of the body being a dependent entity, to deepen in your mind, counteracting our instinct to identify so strongly with our body, accepting all the processes and all the people and all the causes involved in giving rise to what we refer to as my body. Gently coming out of the meditation, becoming aware once again of your body, your surroundings. And maintaining a sense of interconnectedness, we dedicate with this awareness. May all beings everywhere, play by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be free. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world. May it be so.
Okay, thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.